So in this video I want to cover a general game plan for each master and what you should be trying to accomplish through a PvP match. So starting with Soul, when you start a round you generally only start with drills first, everything else is locked behind a contract. This is your only option for round one really, so you just want to pump out as many drills as possible, and then you can see that there's a gear on the top left corner. It's at 100. That is your dragon install meter. So with Soul, you want to keep an eye on this throughout the match, because when it gets to 50 you want to look to buy dragon install. When dragon install gets at 50 you generally want to use it before it reaches 100. This increases your damage by 50% and you can pretty much destroy servants with this. They will die in seconds. Now, it's not the end of the world if you forget and it gets to 100%, because when you're at 100% you get dragon install, which is just, it's good for different things. It's better at fighting masters because you can just rip them a new one essentially. By the time you have between 3 minutes and 1 minute left in a round, you should be fishing for blades. By then you'll have an establishment of the map as well as your opponent. Whether they're hard like capping the map or you're hard winning, it doesn't matter. By this point you should have a healthy amount of drills on the field, which you can then buy a blade contract, which is cheap. It's 150 mana and it only takes 15 seconds for it to become available. And with Soul, this is probably your most strongest unit within all of this. Blades being the most reliable unit for Soul, you can just pump them out en masse and they will generally hold up very well. Generally when a new round starts you are given 600 mana on top of however many ghosts you have times 50. That's just a general formula, that's not always the case. For example, Triara, you have different mana values per round, but it doesn't matter. As long as the round starts, you generally have enough to buy a contract. So with Soul, what I would recommend doing is unlocking Queen first, because she helps supplement you on the other side of the map. So let's say you're focusing on this top lane here. Queen will very quickly come down here and just destroy any armor units and help with the push this side. She does a lot of damage despite the fact that she dies very quickly. She's also extremely cheap, so you can just pump her out every time she's dead, so it's not that much of an issue. How I typically play, when a round ends, every time there's a new round I look to purchase an elite. So by round 3 start I would look to get a fire wheel, so that would be my round 1 start. And then at that point, I probably won't look to buy any other unit, so I would leave Pencil Guy and Golfer, Gigant and Blockhead. I won't even bother with them. I would just pump out Blades, Queens and Firewheel, and then just throw in drills if they're swapping to heavy magic units, because melee units, whilst it doesn't say on this menu, they do have a damage advantage against them. That is pretty much what you should be doing with Soul. He falls off late game. His servants can't match that of any other tribe really late game, except maybe Valentine and Raven. I would say they're on the same sort of wavelength in terms of strength. They tend to fall off as you get to like round 3 onwards. So with Soul especially, you want to try and just kill the enemy master where you can, because if they're playing something like Paradigm or Kai or Sin, if it's round 4, round 5 and they start getting a death blob, you're just not winning, unfortunately. They have all the buffs in the world, whereas you have subpar units. So yeah, just to recap, don't forget about Dragon Install. It's very useful. It will do more damage than these guys, so if you have the choice, buy Dragon Install first and then get Blades. Round 2, get a Queen and push it to the opposite lane you're going as many times as you can, as often as you can. Round 3, get a Fire Wheel as soon as possible, and then just supplement that with your Blades or run around with Fire Wheel, because Fire Wheel will one-shot a master if it's given half a chance. Yeah, that's pretty much all I can think of for Soul and how you should be going around playing him. Oh, sorry, extra things to note. you want to buy Dragon Install, obviously we covered that, and Crimson Jacket. Crimson Jacket gives you an extra point of armor when you're fighting. It's like performing a Volcanic Viper, you just get armor, and you can just punch through attacks, and win the trade and do a free combo basically. It's a very strong ability. Hunchbacks, no. I like them personally. They have very cool attacks. They can cause a lot of stun lock, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not worth it. Just don't worry about it. These, unless you're going for a Jigen, it's not worth it. Plus, it makes your Jigen cost basically 80 to 100 more. I wouldn't bother with it. General tips against Sin and Kai's army: you want to just try and kill Sin and Kai as much as possible before late game, because as mentioned before, your army will basically get outscaled by Kai and Sin's, and you will eventually lose if you've not killed them 4 times by that point. Against the likes of Raven and Valentine, you want to rush your armors as soon as possible, because they only have access to candies. They don't have the armor unit of their own, and they struggle against armors. Even when they buy like a magic unit of their own, the Doctor, I forget its name, it dies very quickly, so it doesn't matter. If you just prioritize the magic units, they die in like 2 hits. Oh, also to mention, don't forget to buy a Dispel at the end of a round just before, because then it'll be available, and it's very handy for the likes of Raven, who will slow you and put slow fields down, which make your units useless. You want to basically dispel them as soon as you see them, because that's Raven's only way of handling a blob situation. Against Izuna, you want to bring dispels. In terms of tribe strength, I would say Izuna outscales Sol as well, because if they get a Deidara going, they have an Ayuki with it, and a blob, they get massive armor buffs. And just in a straight fight, Sol's army won't win. So rush dispels against Izuna so you can stop his Dharma summons, because he'll be freezing you all day, and just look to kill him a lot between round 1 and round 3. Paradigm, you have no choice. You have to just make him your target. Kill him. If he gets his ball rolling, it's game over. His army is faster than yours, outscales yours, and that's it. So again, by the time round 3 ends is when you want to look to win the game, really. Okay, so Sin's game plan, you'll see a pattern with this. You will generally be buying swordsman units for the majority of round 1 until you've established the map. And then once you've established the map, you would probably look to get a gauntlet body on the go. So when you've got like a decent amount of swordsmen on play, and you have room to get the contract going, that's what you would generally do first. Generally this happens around minute 3, when there's 3 minutes remaining or 1 minute remaining. That's typically when I would do something like this. This applies to all masters really. By round 2, you have some flexibility. In round 2, you can either rush a Quadra Bailiff, which is very handy, because if they're still pumping out melee units, this will just eviscerate them. And it also has the added benefit of focusing masters. So if you're running around with this guy and you just drop them, he will just constantly shoot them and be really annoying all the time. If you don't have the money for that and they're pumping out armors, then in round 2 you can look to just pop out Springboks instead. It'll be cheaper and it just gives you more versatility overall. Items you want to buy on Sin, his most important ones are his heal. I'm not going to even try to pronounce that. I think it's called Petakattelstain. Laugh at me if I'm wrong, I don't care. And then Exciter, which increases his damage. I'm not sure what by percentage, but it seems pretty high, like on Dragon Install 50% level. But it doesn't last as long. But it's also readily more available, to be fair. So out of these 2, they're the most important. Phantom Barrel can be handy when you're doing a siege. If you're surrounded by your units and you shoot this, it will just do a lot of damage, but it's not important. It's handy, but not important. Humming Sword, if you're a Sin specialist and you're memeing, you can just buy this and drop it like a Gate Gunner on a ghost to basically get it to help you capture a ghost. I haven't ever played with it, but it's an option. It's probably his most least important skill out of the bunch. So when playing against Soul's army, because Soul is a gorilla, you could probably do with a rapid fire. Rapid fire will curb his offense, so if he's trying to get you into like modern cancel guard break situations, you can just press the no button and it gives you your turn basically. So your turn to then do something. Anything other than unlocked attacks. If you watch that video you'll know why. Dispels, every round, end of round, doesn't matter who you're playing as, it's always a good idea to buy a Dispel. Even if you end up not using it at all for the rest of the games, it's better to have it and not need it than need it to not have it. Because if they drop an anti-rod on you and you don't have a Dispel, that could be game ending, basically. Against Soul, you could possibly, instead of rushing gauntlets round 1 when you can afford them, you can do Springboks instead if you're anticipating a Blade Rush, because obviously mobile units crush Blade units. Against Izuna, the biggest thing is Dispels, because you want to stop him from using his Dharma against you when you bump into each other and start fighting. In terms of tribe, yours, I would say Sin and Kai's is slightly better overall. They just come with more buffs/debuffs. Paradigm, I would say the same strategy applies with Soul. You just want to kill him over and over. In terms of scaling, I think between Paradigm and Kai and Sins, I would say there could be equivalent, just because the Dragon and all the Magic Elite units kind of carry it. Against Raven and Valentine, you want to rush armors and go into Quadra Bailiff, so by near end round 1 you want this on the field in mass numbers, and in round 2 you want to rush these guys because candies will just fall over to them. And of course you want Dispels at the end of round for Raven and all his shenanigans when it comes to his skills. So the unit buy order in general, I would say would be a Gauntlet Body, Springboks round 2, Quadra Bailiff round 3, Convict Hammer round 4, Heaven's Libra round 5 if you haven't got it by then. Specifically against Raven and Valentine, you want to go Gauntlets round 1, by the end of round 1, Quadra Bailiff round 2, Convict Hammer round 3, Heavens round 4. You don't want to get Springboks really until they start pumping out Charlottes, but even then I don't think it's necessary. The units you want to avoid buying would be Wise Man, Twin Trigger, and Humming Sword. They die extremely quickly. As much damage as these units do, they also die extremely quickly. Okay, let's talk about Izuna's game plan. Just a disclaimer, I am not an Izuna specialist. This is just how I would go about playing him. So round 1 is very similar to how all the other ones play. You just dish out melee units until the map's established, if you have control or not, and then during the course of round 1, when you're at minute 3 to minute 1, you want to look to buy your armor unit. I would say the general order of buying Izuna's units would be a Namahage to start with, into a Nekomata-chan round 3, just for versatility, a Kirin to help you with master fights, and then an Ayuki. And then if the game goes later on and you're still going and you can afford a Tengu and a Daidara, go for it. Unit buy order specifically against Raven, I would say just don't worry about Nikos, you won't need them for the majority of the game. So you can start with Namahages, into a Kirin, into an Ayuki, they're the most important ones. What you want to avoid buying is Daidara on big maps. On Triora, I would say it's probably one of the most obnoxious units to deal with, because it just has to go down a small walkway and it will threaten the enemy Master Ghost. So Daidara, I would say personally its usefulness depends on the map. So if it's Triora, absolutely. Any map bigger, it can be useful, but it depends on your experience really. In terms of skills, you want to buy a Dharma Summon. It helps you when fighting. It will slow and freeze the enemy master. It prioritizes them. That just turns you invisible, not very useful. This buffs your units and you can pocket them and it keeps the timer. It's very useful. I see a lot of people do this to make their units tankier and deal more damage. And then Plastic Pomegranate is basically just a very expensive dispel. Don't buy that, just buy a dispel, it's cheaper and more readily available. So against the likes of Sol, you will outscale him slightly in terms of army composition. I would recommend Rapid Fire to curb his offense, because it's Sol, he wants to just kill you, and a Dispel for if he buys anti-rods at any stage. Against Kai, it's the same sort of deal. He's also a gorilla, so Rapid Fire to curb his offense, Dispels for anti-rod use. Against himself in a mirror match, Dispels because you don't want to be frozen. It's frustrating when you get frozen. Against Paradigm, kill him. He outscales you eventually, so you want to kill him at every turn before it gets to ultra late game. Okay, so let's talk Paradigm's game plan. You want to buy a Gate Gunner as the start of the game because that gives you an extra bit of pressure of capturing the ghosts on the map. This will capture a ghost on its own, provided capture units aren't going in its general direction, because summon units take more damage from capture units. They basically die instantly. Similar to everyone else, you just want to roll out your melee unit until the map's established. But in this case, this is probably the worst armor unit in the game. It just stands there for the most part and does nothing except tank. So you want to probably look to rush your Bonebiter as soon as possible. But that's probably a round 2 start. Round 1, you can probably get a lot of map pressure just by running around with Stratagem and Gate Gunner and Dropper. That's pretty much all you need for round 1. Unit buy order in general, I would suggest Bonebiter into Dual Horn into Spirit Seeker, and then if the game's still going, then get a Leonard at the end, because you get a Bower from the get-go as well, which helps if they're starting to push out armor units. Against Raven, it's probably the only useful timer roller. Rush will be a thing, but again, just rush Bonebiter, Dual Horn, Spirit Seeker. It's no real different really. What not to buy? Probably the least useful skill there is, try saying that fucking 10 times, is Aegis Field. It has its use, but it's when you're sieging. Like, if you're just sitting there and they're trying to poke, you just pop this down and they can't do anything. The other 3, this can be handy. It does a massive chunk of damage. I still wouldn't recommend buying it over these 2, but if you can afford it and you're hard winning and you want to troll, just get the grab. When playing against the likes of Sol, you want to just buy a Rapid Fire and outscale him. You don't want to take him on a head-on fight because that's just not going to work for you. You're a parakeet, dragon, frog thing in a bubble. It's not going to work out for you. Against Kai, the exact same applies for Sol. You want a Rapid Fire and Dispel just to get rid of their anti-rods and their aggression. Izuna, it's the same deal. Want Dispels for his Dharma Summon, Rapid Fire to... If they play Izuna aggressively, yep, that just shuts them down. Okay, so game plan with Valentine. It's more or less the same as everyone else. You just rush melees until the map's established, and then the general buy order would be a Charlotte into a Milfoil, a Tiramisu, and if it gets ultra late, an Eclair. But this unit is jank. This unit, I found personally as of late, I fucking hate this unit. It dies in 2 seconds flat, and it's useful for destroying armor units, but if it doesn't even get half a second to do it, I just don't. Just wait until you have all your elites first. Unit buy order specifically against Sol, Raven, and Valentine herself. You want to focus Charlotte into a Tiramisu. Actually, no, I take that back. So you want a Charlotte and a Claire, because it's actually very useful against a mirror match. And Sol, to be fair, because he can't really deal with ranged units. And then Miss Tiramisu. Against the likes of everyone else, you want to start by unlocking a Charlotte as soon as you can. A Milfoil for extra tankiness, because you want to send Charlotte into one lane and Milfoil into the other, because despite her being an elite unit, she is extremely tanky and can summon units and just basically take up a lot of time, as well as being very powerful at destroying things. So playing against Sol, very similar to the likes of Paradigm. Because you're Izuna, you want a rapid fire just to curb his offense where possible, to spell for his Crimson Jacket, and you want to buy some brownie summons just to be annoying so that they block his approach. Also, if he manages to somehow hit you, these brownies will deal damage to him. Against Kai, the exact same rules apply. Against Izuna, the exact same rules apply, especially against an aggressive one. Against Paradigm, I'm not. This is probably the least most played matchup I've ever seen in this game, a Valentine versus Paradigm. You will get outscaled eventually, and you're not exactly a fighter, so going around trying to kill Paradigm with Valentine isn't exactly the move compared to everyone else. Personally, I don't have much experience with the matchup, so I couldn't tell you between these two. I just think naturally, if between two players on the same level, a Paradigm will pretty much win this matchup all the time. In a mirror match slash Raven, dispels against Raven specifically to stop his utility, and brownie summons to just stop his offense. Moving on to Kai, it's more or less the same as Sin, so melee spam until the map's been set, and then Gauntlet Body is your first purchase most of the time. General buy order would be a Gauntlet, Springbok, Quadra Bailiff, Convict Helmet, Heaven's Libra. Against the likes of Raven and Valentine, it'll be Gauntlet, Quadro, Convict, Hammer, and then you kind of just ignore Springbok because it's only useful against Charlotte. So against the likes of Sol, you're a gorilla, so whether you want to take a rapid fire into another gorilla and curb his gorillaness, just bring a rapid fire. Again, dispels are useful for any anti-rods he might bring into round 2, and you could possibly do a Springbok rush instead of armor rush round 1, but it's not necessary. You can get away with just rushing armors, because again, they're the best armors in the game. If you just leave armors versus blades, gauntlets will win 100% of the time. Mirror match against himself, same applies to Sol, just rapid fire dispels where possible. Against Sin, dispels mainly for his anti-rod use and his his power buff thing that he applies to himself. Rapid fire if you just want to shut down anything he does, because his buttons are slow in a Master v Master. Against Izuna, dispels always against armor summons, as well as his anti-rod placements for next round. Against Raven and Valentine, rush gauntlets as soon as possible, because they struggle, and with Raven and Valentine, they are very strong early game until armors are on the field. That pretty much covers Kai. Okay, so with Raven's game plan, it's no different to Valentine's or anyone else's really. It's just candy spam until you have established the map. General buy order would be a Charlotte, Milfordville, Tiramisu, and Eclair. Against the likes of himself and Valentine, then it would just be a Charlotte, Eclair, Tiramisu. Milfordville is not as useful because there aren't any armor units except Charlotte for it to deal with, unless they're spamming Gato skins. But you still want to get a Milfordville last, because in terms of just usefulness in its ability to counter, unless you're expecting a Gato rush, it's just better to go for the other units. So with Raven, if you bump into the enemy master, you will typically have enough money to buy a Not There. Before you engage in a fight, just rapidly buy this and you have an advantage in the fight. This is what I typically do when I bump into them at Ghost and just have a random skirmish. All of his skills are pretty useful, Ledig Black arguably being the worst one out of the bunch. Felsen Whimper shuts down units from attacking in 2 circles, so you can just sit there, especially in Death Balls, and just straight up win a fight if the enemy master doesn't bring a bloody dispel, which they tend to do. This is useful if you knock over a unit, well, master. So only do this when you've caused a knockdown, because that gives you loads of time to cast this heavy slow. And trust me, this slow is heavy. It makes the unit move so goddamn slow. There's no escape when this is applied, unless they apply apply dispel to themselves. Right, so specific matchups. Let's start with Soul. So unit by order against Soul, Raven and Valley, really. Same description as Valentine. You'll go for Charlotte, Claire, Tiramisu into all the other units. Also against Soul, you want to basically try and debuff him where possible. So apply the Ledig Blick where possible to make his offense shut down. And again, you can just apply Dispel to get rid of his Crimson Jacket, and Rapid Fire if needed to curb his offense. Against Izuna, Dispel is super important, again, for the same reason as all the others, Dharma summons. As soon as you see him pop that, you want to pop Dispel to just get rid of it, so you don't get frozen / slowed. Same strategy against Paradigm. You will get outscaled if you just let the game go on, so the idea is to kill him over and over and get him that way. Raven is pretty good at being an assassin, because he looks like one for starters. He has teleporting tools to also help in this regard. Against Kai and Sin, because their armies are the same and the properties are the same, if you don't win by the early mid game, you lose automatically late game via the scaling, because you know their army is just simply better than ours. Ours? I play Raven. We are a tribe. Right, that's probably covering everything. I've probably missed a few details, but hey ho, it's a general rundown of what to be doing with each person against what, and I hope that helps you in some regard playing this game.